A hallmark of many 90s ambient jungle drum and bass tracks were these long atmospheric intros that set the mood of the song and prime the listener for a interstellar journey. With tracks soaring into the 8+ minute range, it wasn't uncommon for an intro to push into the 2 minute range before you even heard a drum or bass note. I'm going to show you how you can approach creating these elegant, atmospheric drum and bass intros like you'd hear in 1997. As mentioned, the intro sets the tone of the song. While some people really dislike long, drawn out intros, I personally love them and want to see more creative tone setting and intros like back in the day. Your intro should set the theme. Very simple, I'm going to keep repeating it. Now, there are many ways to approach an intro, and ultimately, I urge you to use your creative mind when approaching it. Listen to some old tracks from the day, take some tips from this video, and go on and make it your own. Because this is ambient or atmospheric drum and bass, the atmosphere is so important. And atmosphere can come from many places. It can come from synth sounds, so think a pad, from a Korg rompler that by nature has a lot of ambience in it. But another great way is to just simply use atmospheric samples. Now those samples, again, they can come from romplers. For example, the Korg Triton has a lot of great sound effects in it, or just ambient sample packs like the Uncanny Dreams sample pack. And so what I do in my intro, the first note is I want to start to bring in that ambience. And so what I have is a group track here full of all my ambient layers. And the first one we have is this little water sample. And this is going through a big reverb that you hear there, which really helps put that sound out in space and come alive. Then what I did is grab this little bug atmosphere sound. It just sounds like nature. If you were out in a forest, these are the kinds of sounds you would hear. In that, I'm sending through a pretty big delay. And then the final thing we have here is this little sound down here. Just a nice bit of a ambient drone there. And so from that first note, we come in with that water sample, the bugs, and the Atmos sound, and that is just initially setting the vibe for the track. So if we play all these ambient sounds together, it'll sound like this. And you're already off to such a good start with just those ambient samples. And if you've seen my other videos, you know how much I talk about, kind of separating in your song. You have the atmospherics and then you have the synth sounds. They should be able to stand alone as is, but when combined, they should form one cohesive atmosphere. Now, let's get into percussion next. And typically in these big atmospheric intros, you're not going to hear the core beat, right? That typically won't drop for a minute and a half, 2 minutes in. But what you will hear is a lot of one-shot percussive elements that really can help add some sense of rhythm, but also add the atmosphere. And a common technique was to use elements like shakers and hats and send those through big delays. And intertwined in that, you'll hear things like reverse cymbals, transition sounds, and different percussive effects that, again, kind of add that rhythm on top of the atmosphere, but it's not the chord beat. So one thing I have here are some samples from a JV 1080 going through a big delay. And this is such a common sound you'll hear in a lot of these tunes, which is this. So there's different shakers going through the big delays. And you'll see how I painted in the MIDI here and just slowly drop the velocity and send it through a delay to kind of create that. Very, very common in a lot of this. And then here I just have a single hit, also from a JV 1080, A lot of these percussive one-shots, you'll find them in any Rompler, 1080, Korg Triton, M1, so on and so forth. But the idea here is, again, kind of introduce some sense of rhythm within here without dropping that chord break. So if we stack that with the Atmos, and you'll see there's room for those sounds to breathe too, right? So we hit those one shots, we give it a bar to rest, let that delay fade out, then another quick shot, back into the delay one. So we're alternating and creating some type of pattern here. Then what I did is brought in this little percussive loop here. Right, so just a very slow percussive loop. It's using a lot of the same sounds as these one shots up here. Now, when I go to the break here, right before we drop everything at 2 minutes, I bring in some more percussive sounds, and these are some congas that I have like this. Or I'm sorry, this is a triangle that I have playing a nice, steady, sustained pattern, and those percussive delays are playing on top. In that percussion loop. And then on the second piece here, I start to bring in a conga. Right? And so this is a drum kit I just built out again. Bunch of one shots, right? Sending those all through delays and reverb, right? Can't stress enough how important effects are to put things in space and, again, just fill up that stereo spectrum. So those are the types of percussive sounds you'll see used a lot in intros, outside of that chord break. Now, I do want to talk about transition effects next, because I'd kind of categorize these in the same realm as percussion. And so as that atmosphere is rolling along, the percussion is kind of rolling along, you want to try to fill in the gaps with movement, and that will be things like risers like this. And you'll see how that's kind of offset between the two bars, right? Oftentimes I think we place everything just directly on the beat, but what you can do to create more natural flow is just offset these sounds. So, this riser isn't starting until, near the end of this specific phrase. And then another sound we have here is, you guys already know, a little bit of a mark tree on the beat there as we transition and bring in the pad, which we'll take a look at in a second. So all of these percussive elements together are adding that just like subtle rhythm, atmosphere, and helping create a smooth flow once we bring in everything else. Synthesizers, sounds, vibes. I like to bring in some of my core synth elements into the intro. So if there's a very specific pad that's going to be playing throughout the full song, I love to tease it out in the intro and try to capture that listener's attention. So what I did here is I have this pad from my Korg TR rack, which is just a Korg Trinity, a really nice pad here, chucked into a sampler. Big delay, sounds like this. So if we stack that with the Atmos, and we bring in the percussion, Right, so now this intro, this song is really taking form. We started with just very basic atmosphere. It's slowly building up. We're bringing in more atmosphere, bringing in more percussion, and then that pad hits, and it's just a very full, rich atmosphere. Now, what I then do is bring in a few more sounds here, and one is this electric piano strum. Very gorgeous. So we have a nice strum and then a little bit of a lick, and then we have the second variation. And that's helping bring emotion into it, right? Because the atmosphere, the pad alone, doesn't really evoke emotion the same way that a nice electric piano chord does, right? That just strums through very gracefully. And so what I'm trying to do is build in emotion with that EP, and then I bring in this high string, and strings are one of the best ways to introduce emotion into your song. So all this is chugging along, then we bring in a string. So everything together. And so this is just building up and building up, right? So again, we're slowly building the song together in this intro and teasing out the vibe. More sounds are coming in, the emotion is building up, and that listener knows, right, kind of what to expect from the song. Now, another common thing to do from this era was use spoken word or vocal samples from movies, TV shows, interviews, etc. And these types of samples can really help set the mood. And a perfect example of this is the song Hypersleep by Voyager, which is iconic for its usage of that dialogue from the movie Aliens. And so, great way to set the tone, especially if you can find some dialogue that matches the vibe and feel of your track. That's one way you could approach it, is introducing some dialogue. So that's what we have down here. Not the best example, but just to give you an idea, we have that little bit of dialogue here, and then the pad comes in right after. So play around with finding cool dialogue from movies that you like, and that really helps add your personal touch to the song. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here is, ultimately in that intro, we're building to that drop, right? Where the core break comes in, the bass comes in. Now, a technique I like to do here is in this intro, we're building up this huge, big atmosphere wall of sound. And then before we transition into the drums, I cut a lot of the core elements. And so you'll see we're building up, and then everything kind of drops out here before we go into, right, the drums and the bass. And what I found is this helps create a moment of clarity in the track, right? Think we're building up everything. It's loud. There's sounds flying all over the place. And then all of a sudden, everything cuts out, or a lot of the core elements. And that, again, generates this clarity where the remaining sounds, while less in number, sound much more full and impactful. And so you're getting this adrenaline rush from all these sounds. Bam, now you get this clarity, and then boom, it drops right into the core song with the beat. And so that's what we did here, and it's a bit of a theme shift too, right? We have this very distinct pad, and that kind of goes away and transitions to a soft pad, but I think it makes for a very nice moment here. Anyways, that's just some ideas there, different ways you could approach making a nice classic atmospheric drum and bass intro. So many ways you could go with this, and everyone interprets this differently. So hope to see some cool spins on this from people, and I want to see the 2-minute intros make a return. Some people are gonna hate me for that, but I don't care. Thanks for the support, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you in 2024.